Well, good morning. It's another Tuesday. So good to be back with you guys. And things look a little different here, probably. It's because Matt and I are both on the road this week, and we had to record today from our home offices this past week on Friday. So coming to you delayed, but grateful for understanding and being with us. As I said, Matt and I are here recording on Friday the 21st, which is kind of ironic because, when we talk about goal setting, as we did in the beginning or in December, when we talk about goal setting, we always say how it takes 21 days to establish a new habit, right? 21 days to get to a new routine. And here, Matt and I were talking about how many people we've been interacting with that on the 21st of the month are still thinking about
Mhm.
implementing their new goals for the year. How Matt?
Yeah, and I think it's great that we actually have to record this show. Last year around this time, we would have probably said, "Well, there's nobody watching, so we can probably skip a week or two while we travel." But we have a couple more people, and we're blessed to have a bit of a following on this that utilize it, and we have a lot of fun. But yeah, and I think there's, Bill, a difference between goal setting and really owning the goals and owning the numbers, especially when it pertains to the business aspect of life. But we when we talk about goal setting, we think about holistically. We're big fans of role-based planning, ROLE. For those of you that have seen the show before or interacted with us, and so when we start to plan, we always advise that it's not just business, right? We look at the roles in our life, and we're more than just a salesperson, or we're more than just a leader. So
We're more than 9 to 5 people, right?
yeah.
And if we try to only have goals that are 9 to 5 goals, it doesn't work. We have to integrate our lives. We have to totally, and it's funny because the people that we work with that are so successful are usually integrated.
Hmm.
They're not the people that just brag about working 16 hours a day. They're not the people that are always wearing the busy button. When you say to them, "Hey, how you doing?" The first thing they say to you back is, "Oh, I'm busy." They're usually people that have some integration of life and and have some measurable goals and vision for their life in multiple areas.
Hmm. Well, and it's we just started an engagement that we're tag teaming, obviously, and we were starting to do some one-to-ones. And I talked to a gentleman, and very, very impressive from a metric-based approach, from understanding where he needed to be in sales and the numbers and how to get there and spreadsheets. But throughout our conversation in our first one-to-one, he started talking about how he's getting married and how excited he is, and you could just see, obviously, in his face how excited, and he kept bringing it up. And so at the end of the call, I said, "Hey, you're very buttoned up from a sales perspective, but what are your goals of being a great husband?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We've talked for an hour, and I can see, I could see how important this is to you. I could see the joy that it's going to bring you. I can see the motivation, and you're very, very impressive in sales. But my challenge to you is, what are your goals of being a great husband?
Yeah,
How
and
are
how
you
will
going
you
to be
measure that?
intentional?" Yep.
Yeah, and if you are a great husband, how would anyone know? Right? What are we going to be able to go to as a scorecard for that? Because you can't just go through the motions with that one. And I think being a husband is important to you and I, and it's something that I'm sure you spoke passionately about.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when it's not sales and it's not, you can find it on a spreadsheet. It's difficult to come up with goals. But we oftentimes find that, regardless of the role, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, you can end up making a goal, whether it be, I know one of your was, spend more time without your phone, right? That's the
Mhm.
one that you brought up while with your family for years. Mine was um, being present reading a book every night to Lucy.
Hmm.
And
Very
so,
cool.
that's measurable, that's trackable. But anyways, I know everyone's not here to listen to some of our own personal goals in our personal life, but I think they're great examples of trying to be a holistic person.
Absolutely. And you think about like your goal of reading a book a night, and in your case, reading one to Lucy, and that's a sign of being present. So it goes deeper. I was with my brother-in-law recently, who's a senior executive with a major corporation, and he and I were talking, and I was blown away, which actually stimulated our conversation today about
Hmm.
goal setting. I was blown away when I talked to him about what's his goal, what's his goal for the next role that he might take, because in his organization there's a continuous progression. You're not expected to stay in one job for very long. And he was telling me, like, over his career, what his personal growth numbers are. He's in sales and has led sales teams. And he said, over the years, here's my personal growth number
Hmm.
compared to the company growth number. And here's what I've been able to do in the past 18 months with the new business unit I had. It was remarkable, the ownership he had of the numbers, the ownership he had of the insights. And when you have that, that's when you're committed to a goal, right? It's not good enough. I always joke and say my son's half Southern, because every time I ask him to do something, he says, "I'm getting ready to." I said, "Yeah, you're like a Southerner. It's always fixing to do something, right? You're fixing, you're fixing to clean your room. You're fixing to do this." And I think that happens with so many salespeople, so many executives we work with, or business owners we work with, where when we ask them things about where they are, they're fixing, right? Well, I'm fixing to do this essentially. They tell us I'm thinking about it, I'm planning it, I'm getting ready. But it's essentially that, I'm fixing to do something down the road, but there's no commitment to today. There's no commitment
Hmm.
to the now. And when's tomorrow? Matt's heard me say this more times than he probably cares to. But as I've said before, the saddest day in the history of the human race is when we learned the meaning of the word tomorrow. And how many people use that word in their vocabulary about I'll do it tomorrow. And by the way, I'm guilty of this. So I
Hmm.
get especially passionate about it because I'm especially convicted by it. But how many times do we say, well, I'll do that tomorrow, I'll do that next month, I'll do that next week? How many times do we accept call me next week or call me in 2 weeks from a prospect with no meaning and no reason? How often does a prospect say to you, that's something we want to take care of in Q2? And do we have the tenacity? Do we have the conviction and the courage to ask that prospect, what's changing in Q2? What's magical about Q2? Why are you targeting Q2? And the reality is it's usually nothing except I want to buy time or they want to buy time. So if you're somebody that's been putting off your goals till tomorrow, putting them off till February, putting them off till Q2, you challenge yourself, look in the mirror and say why. And if there's no good reason for it, why not start today?
Well, I think Bill too. You touched on, and I just love the idea of ownership, owning the goals, owning the numbers. Whenever we do coaching, because every salesperson in the world knows their quota, or nearly everyone has a quota. And so you
Right.
say, what are your goals? I want to sell 60K this year, or 15 million, or whatever it may be for the industry. Everybody knows that, but in my mind, that's an outcome. That's not necessarily a goal, right? That's where we want to be, and that's what we're measured. But that's more of just an outcome. Where we're big fans of understanding the baby steps, the activities, the things that happen underneath that. So for instance, every year, regardless of the type of year, when you go into goal setting, salespeople say, "Hey, I want to prospect more. We need to prospect more." And I'm always waiting for the dot, dot, dot. What does that
Yep.
look like? Help me
Yeah.
understand what that means. We're going to prospect more. So, when you take a look at prospecting, when we're goal setting, it needs to be more than that. Are you going to define it by touches? Are you going to define it by the activities? So in my mind, that's the effort component to it. But then I also think there's an effectiveness component that touches, but advanced conversations. Are we measuring how we're moving someone, from just a hello, to an appointment or to an engagement? We can measure the different types of prospecting, the diversification of touches. In some industries, it could be drop-ins or handwritten notes or phone calls or demos. And then I think, also the diversification of who we're going after, centers of influence, old lead proposals, net new. So there's a million ways that we can spin it and we can chop it. So we can't just stop at prospecting is one of my goals this year. I want to do more. Well, what does more mean? And,
Right.
and what does that look like? And prospecting is just one element of goal setting. If I could, just real quick, and I'll let you jump in. This year, I challenged all the people that I coach. Yes, in prospecting, we have to have some goals there. How often do we look at sales cycle? What are our goals in becoming a better salesperson at analyzing our sales cycle? Whether that's questioning, whether that's when we come up against a certain type of prospect or a certain selling environment. FANT. What's one letter of FANT, financial impact, authority, need, timeline, that we really want to bone up on, or we feel like we're weaker on? So digging into setting a goal in our sales cycle. What about relationships? How often do we set goals for relationships, whether it's in our office, or maybe it's somebody that impacts us, an inside salesperson or a channel partner, or someone like a COI? And then finally, personal development. How often do we set goals for time management, delegation, mindset, head trash, all the things we've been talking about? So that was rapid fire, but I'm just trying to give a breadth of what we believe in. The areas goals should be more than quota, more than, hey, I need to prospect.
Yeah, and it's funny, Matt, as you go through those categories, that's another critical component, is actually having categories of goals versus just, the general goals. And when you have those categories, the other thing is being mindful and owning, when we talk about this total ownership and extreme ownership, is what happens when we trip and fall? What happens when we stumble? I remember on some people, friends of mine and family members have talked about doing the Bible in a year this year, which was last year the number one podcast in America, I believe, was the Bible in a year with Father Mike Schmitz. And, I said, oh, that'd be kind of cool. And, people were talking about doing it. I said, maybe I'd like to do that too. And on like January 3rd, when I hadn't started it yet, I was like, well, there goes that one. Now I'm waiting until next January 1st, right? And is that really the approach I should be taking versus just like, well, why not just start today? Because it doesn't have to be Bible in a year and complete it by December 31st. Is this something that's going to help me become a better version of myself? Is this something that's going to help me grow? Is this something that's meaningful to me? Well, it goes back to the theory of planting trees. If I wanted shade today, when was the best day to plant a tree? Probably 20 years ago. When's the second best day to plant a tree? Today. So if you've fallen off the wagon and you're not sticking with your goals, if you haven't hit the goals that you set out for this year, that's no reason to quit or give up on the goal. Examine, was it the right goal, and is it
Mm-hmm.
something that really is going to help you drive forward? And why do we have goals? Why do we create goals? I think we create goals because we want a better life. We want a better life in some way. And it's impossible to have a better life if I keep doing the same things. So if I do what I'm doing, if I continue to do what I'm doing, and I do tomorrow what I did, if I do today what I did yesterday, and then do tomorrow what I did today, guess what I'm going to have? The same life I have. If I am to live a better life, if to live a fuller life, a richer life, a life that is better for others and making others' lives better, then I probably need to do something different today than I did yesterday. And that's the reason we create goals, is we look at the outcomes. We typically look at, what do we want that's better? Where do we want to grow? What do we want that's going to bring us greater joy, bring us greater peace, bring us greater happiness. And we say, oh, to do that, I'm going to do this. So, I want to start working out. Nobody says I want to start working out because they just want to start working out. People want to work out so they can have better health. They can fit into clothes. They can feel better about, going up steps, whatever it might be. So working out is the path to that better life. um, Better life would be the outcome there, right? So, to Matt's point earlier about we can't manage outcomes, we can only manage the behaviors. So, bearing in mind, there's a reason we want to do these things, and that reason is richness, is the richness of our lives. But we can't live better lives if we don't do things differently than we have done them to date.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say on goals, more isn't always better. And that's why we challenge people with understanding their
Mhm.
why, understanding those outcomes that really move the needle, and allow them to get passionate, right? Even emotional. When we're talking about the why when we first start coaching people, yeah, it's pretty emotional, and we know that's the right landing spot. And so, if we don't know that why, we don't know that end goal, it doesn't have to be one more component to this. It doesn't have to be 20 years down the road. Often, these big picture, really important things, um, are many years of work. And we always challenge individuals that, break that down. How do you start going down that path of you want to be a great father, or you want to provide life experiences that you didn't necessarily have? Well, what does that look like next year, in 2022, or this year? So be able to break down your why and tie it back to that those emotional things. And I agree. Bill, you mentioned the Bible, um, the Bible study, or the Bible in a year, and
Mhm.
it's reminiscent of myself and other conversations that we have. So I think it's a great opportunity as we set goals. How are we going to track them? Because if we're not tracking them, eventually we're going to forget them. We can't keep everything up in our head.
Mhm.
So how are we going to track them? How are we going to hold ourselves accountable? What happens if we fall off? But then, most importantly, at least from my perspective, is when and where on our calendar do we find the time to be able to reflect on how we did that given week?
Mhm. Yeah, and it's funny. When we interview sales candidates, we use assessments from our partners at Objective Management Group, and the data tells us that salespeople, with written goals and a system of tracking them, are infinitely more successful than those that don't. So, that maybe that's our challenge for the week: is do we have written goals, or do we just have ideas in our head of things we might want to do? And how are we going? How are we going down the path so far this year? Because there's still time to have an incredible impact on 2022. We still own 2022 and its results. It's still early enough for us to change behaviors to get better results. And maybe this is the week for you that you actually take those ideas, like all the things you're fixing to do in 2022, because all of us might be half Southern, but all those ideas that you're fixing to do in 2022, and actually get them on paper and give yourself a meaningful system to track them. I know that my dog was pretty excited about today's show, and you might have heard him joining in. I guess he's writing some goals, and if his barking annoyed you, I apologize, but that's part of the beauty of pandemic living, right? Where when we're all remote, we get to meet each other's kids, dogs, and everything else. So thank you guys for bearing through that. If you heard Buddy in the background, and thank you for bearing with Matt and I's travel schedule and a little bit different view today. But take some time this week to think about the areas of your life that you want to improve, the areas of your life that you want to make better, and then what are some of the goals you need to capture, measure, track, and review on an ongoing basis to deliver that better life? Because I think we're all capable of that. And remember, it's just a matter of consistency and honesty with ourselves. There's no shame in missing days, or no shame in being a little delayed. The only shame, I guess, there would be in not not trying. And looking back 20 years from now and saying, boy, I wish I would have planted a tree that day so I had some shade. And today's our opportunity to do that. So thank you all for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Matt, be safe out there, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much. Take care. God bless.